So many of you know our speaker, Karen O'Neill. She's currently the coordinator of our important bird areas, and she also, our bird area surveys, and she also finds time to go birding in more exotic locations, such as the Pribilof Islands in Alaska and in Brazil. And tonight it's our pleasure to join Karen in her recent adventures in India. So Karen?
Can you hear me okay? How about in the back? Too loud? Okay. All right. Thank you, Laura. And thanks for coming, everybody. It's been about a year since I was in India. And there were several reasons, but maybe three big reasons that I wanted to go. One was the opportunity to go do a special day field trip to go see the Taj Mahal. The other one was that one of the national parks we were going at also is a reserve for Bengal tigers. So there's never a guarantee. It's just like all the birds. No guarantee you're going to see anything. And I put this picture up on here first because this tiger, everybody in our group, 60 people plus our guides, saw this tiger on the very first afternoon we were in this park. So, and believe it or not, we were told that this tiger is a cub. Well, at the time, which was a year ago, he was, they said, 22 months old. And the reason they still refer to him as a cub is he wasn't quite totally independent from his mother. I mean, I think he was doing some hunting, but she was also making sure that he had at least one sibling had adequate food. And then the other thing, of course, was the birds. So I just want to kind of give you a sense. India is so huge, and really, as it come to find out, which I didn't know till I pulled these maps up, because I was trying to find these places on my atlas map, and the atlas map just wasn't detailed enough. So anyway, we flew into Delhi, which isn't quite in Rajasthan, but it's close. But we were totally in the state of Rajasthan, which is right here, this pretty big one. Just have to make sure I go the right direction here. And then, so let's see. So you can see Delhi right there. And then the next place I went a couple days early, so I did do a couple things in or right around Delhi, but which I'll just mention briefly. But then we kind of drove, I'm not sure, probably, I don't really know how we went, but it seems like this looks like a big highway, and we were on a big highway for a while. And, we were in a bus, so what do I know? And then we ended up staying in a really lovely lodge just a little south of this big city named Bharatpur, which is right there. And amongst other things, one day we went to a field trip to Agra. Now that's where the Taj Mahal is. But the park that we went to is Keoladeo, and that's right around in here. And we were there a total of 3.5 days, and then we went down to this area, and Ranthambore is the name of the national park. You'll get to see all these names, but it's right there. And that was it, and then we went back to Delhi. So that's all of India I was in, which isn't really a lot. Okay, and let me just back up here for a minute. So we went, went with the American Birding Association. I'm a member of that group. It's a group, a nationwide group for birders. Actually, it's North American because it's also for Canadians. And they're the people who, for those of you who keep lists, do the ABA list in the ABA area, that's them. And then, but they partnered with a company called Rock Jumper Birding Tours that is actually out of South Africa. And the name rock jumper comes from one of two species of rock jumpers, songbirds, in South Africa. Okay, so let me just continue on here. So most of my photographs were taken by this gentleman, Greg Johnson. He and his wife, Robin, that's her with him, Robin Keppel, were on the trip with the same trip that I was on, as was my sister, Ellen Wiggin, who some of you have met, some of the women, and of course, several other people, another almost 5 dozen. But Greg is a research biologist from Cheyenne, Wyoming, and he had posted 570 pictures on Flickr, for those of you who are Flickr folks. It's a website. And something like 12 or 13 videotapes as well. So I emailed him and asked him if I could use his photos or some of his photos, and he said, sure, use all you want. So that's Greg. Now, the first day, because I said I went a couple days early, so my first touring day was a tour of Delhi, and I could spend, this whole program just telling you that much, but I'm not going to. So I'm just going to do this picture. This is a mausoleum built by one of the Mughals. Those were the ruling folks, mostly Muslim, in 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th centuries, maybe longer, I'm not sure. But my question here is, does the architecture, not the color, but the architecture of this remind you of anything? Or look kind of familiar? Well, it could look like a Capitol building, but it isn't. It's a mausoleum. Actually, I think it reminded me of the Taj Mahal. And I hadn't even seen the Taj Mahal at the time, but of course I'd seen pictures. Actually, as it turns out, this mausoleum was built by the father of the man who had the Taj Mahal built in Delhi, and his, 30 some odd wives and more concubines and gazillion kids are all in this mausoleum. And then my second day, I did more of a birding day. So for the morning, we went to Sultanpur National Park, which is just a very short distance north of Delhi. And we spent a morning there. And this, by the way, is a bee swarm. Can you really tell? All these are individual bees. It's got, I don't know how many, hundreds in there. Which fortunately, they just stayed right there. We were very happy that that's what they did. This is a bar-headed goose, obviously, but it's real pretty goose. We saw them there. A black-winged stilt, which, as you can tell, is obviously a close relation to our black-necked stilt. Even the legs are bubblegum pink. And they're about the same size and everything. They behave the same way, or pretty similar. This is a white-breasted water hen. By the way, the Sultanpur has a lot of wetlands, so that's why you're seeing quite a few water birds, at least for starters, here. And this is in the rail family. Kind of does look a little bit like a moorhen, doesn't it? And this is a gray-headed swamp hen, which is also in the rail family. And by the way, I know there's an exotic population that's now breeding in Florida. And this and the purple swamp hen, the purple doesn't have gray on the head. I think that's the only difference. It's purple on the head. Actually, they've both been added to the ABA official list because they're in Florida. They both have breeding populations there. And that's just been recently added in the last few years. A yellow-footed pigeon, I've also seen this referred to as a yellow footed green pigeon, because there's more than one green pigeon. That mean they look kind of green like this, but different color feet, I suppose. I don't know. This is the only one of the green pigeons we saw. Long-tailed shrike, I think that, and it does look a lot like our shrikes, and of course it's the same family. This is a red-breasted flycatcher, but this is not the flycatchers we're accustomed to, not even the same family. Probably not even the same order, but don't quote me on that. But this is from a family called Old World flycatchers, and they're actually more closely related to thrushes as we understand thrushes, our thrushes and robin and stuff, than they are to our flycatchers. And this black redstart is actually, this picture, by the way, was taken by my sister. But this one is not a warbler, which is, we always think of redstarts as being warblers. It is, in fact, another Old World flycatcher. These are nilgai or niljai. I'm not sure how they say it. Amazing the size difference between the female and the male, isn't it? The picture looks kind of foggy because it was pretty early in the morning when we saw them, and I actually took this picture, and it was foggy, so that's why. We did see, I think, a couple of males in Ranthambore, but this was not an antelope it is a large antelope, and it's not something we saw commonly. So in the afternoon, after we had a lovely lunch, we went to this fort, which happens to be on the south side of Delhi. The other one was on the north side, to go birding for the afternoon. We actually didn't go to look at the fort. We went to look at the birds, but you kind of couldn't miss some stuff. Again, the fort belonged to, I'm not sure whether Taglalabad is the name of a person or whether it was the name of an area at the time. It probably wasn't part of Delhi back in the 14th century. Delhi did exist, but it probably was not built all the way out to where this thing is now. So here's one of the birds we saw there, a red-vented bulbul. This is a family. Bulbuls are a family that are found, far as I know, only in the Old World. I think well named with a red vent. Some people have other names for that, like Chrism. And this is a red whiskered bulbul, and there's the little red mark on its cheek. That's the red whisker. That's what it's named for. And then this is a purple sunbird. This was the only sunbird that we were likely to have any opportunity to see. And I'm not sure where Greg took this picture, but the only place I saw it was at Taglalabad. And but it takes it fills the same ecological niche in the Old World as hummingbirds do in the New World. There are no hummingbirds outside of North and South America, you know. All the hummingbirds are in the New World. So there are sunbirds, and there's a lot of sunbirds if you look in a lot of different field guides. I don't recall that there was a lot in India particularly, but anyway, I didn't study. If it wasn't on my list, I didn't study them for obvious reasons. Okay, this is a 5-striped palm squirrel. These palm squirrels were everywhere. They were they were rarely on palms. I won't say they were never on palms, but if there weren't palms around, they'd be on anything, any tree, any post, you name it, there they were. They're a little bigger than a chipmunk, but smaller than most of our rock squirrels even. And then this rhesus monkey there was a whole troop of them actually, but this one decided to pose for us just outside the entryway into Taglalabad Fort. So then not the next day after that, because a lot of the main group came the next day, and we just got together. And then the day after that, we left and went to stay at this lodge, the Bog, which I could have shown you photos, but I could have shown you so many photos, I just had to make decisions. Anyway, this is the entryway into Cayo Ladeo National Park. We were in the area for a total of 3.5 days. One day we went to the Taj Mahal and some other historical places, particularly in Agra, like the Agra Red Fort. And another day we went to another area that had different kinds of things, which I'm going to get to, so I'll tell you about that when we get there. And then we had a day and a half. I mean, and of course we were all in small groups when we actually went birding. We didn't go birding with 60 people. So one group would be, there might be 2 or 3 groups at the Taj, and another group here, and another group off some other place, that kind of thing. Again, this was taken in the morning. Every morning it looked like this, kind of cloudy, sort of semi-foggy, or smoggy, I sometimes think. Certainly was, smog in Delhi, by the way, was horrible. And in fact, I just heard it surpassed Beijing as the smoggiest city in the world. Just heard that in the news a couple nights ago. Anyway, and we went on foot and sometimes, but our first afternoon we went entirely by bicycle rickshaw. So they had 30 or 40 bicycle rickshaws because they take 2 people apiece. And we spent we all did go the very first afternoon bicycling around Cayo Ladeo National Park, which is, again, it was identified and designated as a national park because it has beautiful, beautiful wetlands, and they wanted to protect them for the wildlife. So I do want to give India a lot of credit for that. Anyway, this was kind of an interesting adventure. So here's some of the ducks. I didn't even try to do them all. But I tried to pick ones that you aren't going to see here, because we did see some there that we do see here. So this is a ruddy shell duck, and we don't have any shell ducks in this country. Unless they may once in a blue moon end up somewhere in Alaska as being blown in or something, but normally we don't have them. This one is a ferruginous duck. Now we don't have that, and this is a Eurasian moorhen, but it looks just like our now called, now we call it a common gallinule. They're very closely related to coots. And this is gadwall. So for those of you many of you know gadwalls. But the ferruginous duck is related to our ringneck duck, same genus. This is a gray francolin, actually in the same family as our dusky grouse, or for those of you who are not keeping up with all the changes, they used to call them blue grouse, and you could see them up on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. They're a fairly common bird. We saw them more than once. A little grebe, really does look like a grebe, and I think it's actually tinier than a least grebe, if any of you have been to Texas, South Texas, and seen least grebes. This is a painted stork. That's the same picture that Russ put on the flyer. What can I say? What beautiful colors. This is, of course, as an adult, males and females look the same. These are the juveniles, however. They seem to have the ugly duckling syndrome, I think. And obviously, these are nestlings, actually, because they aren't even flying yet. These are great cormorants, and interestingly enough, great cormorants are also found in the northeastern part of the U.S. In fact, the very first one I ever saw in my life was standing in the middle of a river in Maine. I don't remember which river now, but. And this is a little cormorant. They also have Indian cormorant that's kind of medium size in between, but I didn't have a decent picture, and Greg didn't seem to have a decent one either. So, this is an oriental darter. Again, I think same. It is the same genus as the anhinga, which you can see mostly in either very South Texas or South Florida. And this is a black bittern, really skulky. The fact that Greg got this picture just blows my mind, because this bird was so skulky, and for him to get a picture that wasn't, where it wasn't half covered with twigs, is amazing. It's related to it's in the same genus as our least bittern, but it's quite a bit bigger than our least bittern. More the size, I would think, by looking at it, of our American bittern, actually, but it's not the same genus. This is a purple heron. Kind of reminds you of a great blue heron, and there's a good reason for that. This purple heron and this gray heron are in the same genus as the great blue heron. And they're not quite as big as a great blue heron, but they're pretty close. Maybe great egret size. This is an Indian pond heron. I don't think I could find that its genus is even. It's in the same family as all the other herons, but it's not a genus that we have here. This bird is not in breeding plumage. It's not a real like knock your socks off, even like the purple heron. Anyway, at least according to the picture in the book, but but it's got some pretty rust and tans and stuff on it when it's in breeding plumage. But when this bird flies, the entire wing is pure white. You see it fly, and it is just like mind-boggling. You're startled to see that happen. And they just usually fly for short distances low, really quickly. So believe me, I tried a photo. No luck. This is a tawny eagle. Kind of doesn't look real big because he's up against that tree. But this is the same genus as a golden eagle, and it's pretty close in size to a golden eagle, actually. This is a shikra. Now this is we don't have anything like a shikra really, except that it is in the same family. I think let me double check my notes. Yeah, it's even the same genus as our Cooper's hawk. So it's an accipiter. The Saurus crane, this is actually the tallest flying bird on the planet. When it stands upright, which of course it's not doing now. It really is. I think it's something like pushing 6 feet tall. And I forgot to look this up, but I believe it's the same genus as the sandhill crane. I mean, the red on the head would be and the kind of gray color would be sort of suggestive of that. Bronze-wing jacana. I guess that's a pretty darn good name for that bird. We don't have jacanas here, but once in a blue moon one shows up in Texas. But there's not the same species, but other species in Central America and South America. Laughing dove. This is actually this bird is named for its vocalization. They weren't vocalizing too much in India, but I first saw one and saw them, more than one. They're pretty common in South Africa, and they kind of like sit around on the utility wires, and they go, you really feel like they're laughing at you. Anyway, it's in the same genus as the Eurasian collared dove, which is an introduced species here. This is a Eurasian hopu. It's not related to anything else that I know of, except its cousin, the African hopu, that it looks very much. Did you see them, John? Yeah. Anyway, they're very interesting birds. They're pretty confiding. They're not terribly afraid of people. Of course, this was in the national park, so maybe they're just used to people. I don't know. And then they can raise that crest on their head, so it's kind of like this big fan-looking thing. They're pretty. Coppersmith barbet. I didn't take the time to look up and see if this is a similar family. There are barbets in Central and South America. It looks like they could be the same family, but I did not look that up, so I'm not going to say they are. I don't know whether this guy is building a hole, kind of like woodpeckers do for a nest, or whether it's just trying to get insects. I'm not sure. And then this is a cousin to that guy, a brown-headed barbet. I'm surprised Greg got this picture too, because every barbet I saw was half covered with leaves. House crow, kind of similar to American crows, or in our case, ravens, and the same genus. And this is the third bulbul that we saw on the trip, a white-eared bulbul. And the only place we saw that was here at Cayo Ladeo National Park. I don't know whether range is that restricted or whether it just happened to be the luck of the draw. An Ashyprinia, it's not related to anything that we know of. It's related to a family of birds called cisticolas that live in Africa, various places in Africa, and they're the same family as that. And this is a jungle babbler. There was 4 or 5 species of babblers, and to be honest with you, except for size, they all looked like this. And they all do babble. By babble, I'm not saying they go babble, but they all are talking, kind of vocalizing all the time to each other. And I think they do spend some time in mixed flocks, especially since this was February. Where we were in India it's still temperate climate. It's well north of the equator, kind of like northern Mexico, and in terms of latitude. And so they were hanging around a lot together in flocks. They were everywhere. And this is an Indian robin. Again, not a robin, not a thrush. It's an old world flycatcher. But kind of a pretty bird. It's sort of interesting colors, I thought. And this blue throat. Now this is another old world flycatcher. This one and the next one that I'm going to show you are sometimes found in particularly northern Alaska. I think that they often say if you take a trip to Nome area, that's in the spring at least, that's a possibility. So here's the blue throat, and here's its cousin, the Siberian ruby throat. Yeah, pretty. And really, this bird, we saw it kind of in a little dip, which is, I think, actually where Greg took that picture. And it was very shady in there. And the bird is that brownish color, and you don't really see it that well in the shade, in amongst little twigs and stuff, and it was pretty skulky. And then all of a sudden it runs out, and you see that red throat, and you go, boing! This is an orange-headed thrush. Now this one is really a thrush. I think maybe Greg got a little carried away on the photoshopping on the orange on this one, but I mean it really is an orange head and an orange breast, and that was obvious. Plus I saw it in the shade, and he might have seen it in the sunlight when he took the picture. I don't know. I'm not sure when he took it. So, but that was one everybody the guides got very excited about. So apparently it's a hard one to find. Brahminy starling. It's in the starling family, related to the European starling, but where it is over there, it's a true native. unlike the European starling here. And this is a Bengal monitor, obviously a lizard. I never did see the whole thing. That's the best we ever saw of it. I thought that was pretty good. And but I would guess, just from what you can see, that it's probably 3-ish feet long. And this is the Taj Mahal. This was taken about 8:30 in the morning, this picture. It's smoggy. Agra is a large city of 1 million people. This is what it looks like in the morning. That's my sister, by the way. I'm sure you can tell the difference. Now here it is at 11:30. Now by that time, mostly it burned off. But there's these beautiful gardens all around it. And I think the minaret is actually, I believe, they never really explained it, but they are pretty much maintenance free, but they do have to wash them periodically. This marble washes with soap and water. That's how they clean them. And it doesn't hurt the marble. So I think that's why it has the scaffolding around it. And then this elephant statue is at a kind of a combination of a museum and a art works place to kind of where they demonstrate the art that was taking place at the time of the Taj Mahal, which was the 16th century, I believe, 15 something. And I'm bringing this up because the Taj Mahal is not just white marble. It has a lot of decor. In fact, I can point out a little bit. It's very hard to see in this picture, but right up in here you can see a lot. You can see that it looks a little different, and that is from having inlays of these semi-precious stones. So they don't look like, I mean, it's not the same decoration, but the idea is the same. They're flowers, by and large. So some of the semi-precious stones here, this red is carnelian, this blue is lapis lazuli, this one is turquoise. There's a little yellow, I think it's right in there, that's jasper. I believe this darker one probably is onyx, although it looks a little pale for onyx. And then it's really hard to tell, but these white flowers are mother of pearl. And that's not the only ones they use, but that just gives you it's probably one of the best samples I could find that would actually show in a picture. So then the last day while we were in this Bharatpur area, we went to a place called Bund Bharatha. And I believe Bund means dam, because this is actually a reservoir, and in fact, we're standing on the dam. And you can't tell, but out there in the water, there's a lot of waterfowl. But that was kind of our destination. It wasn't the only place. You know, we didn't just drive there, look at the water birds, turn around and go back. It took us till noontime to get here, which was fine. So on the way, I'm going to show you about 12 species that we saw. Brown crakes. These are rails in the rail family, and there are crakes in Central and South America. And I, and maybe a few of you, some of the others of you, have spent time trying to find these things. They are the most skunky, elusive birds, species, or family, genus, whatever they are, I've ever seen. Well, look at these, standing out there on a rock. I did see them, but I didn't see them this well, I can tell you that. Yellow wild lapwings. Lapwings are in the plover family, and I actually have more pictures than what I'm even going to show you, but we saw lots of lapwings of various species. So here's a red wild lapwing, It doesn't have as much, doesn't really have a wattle like the yellow one does, but it is red, so. And this is a greater painted snipe. Now, greater painted snipe, there is a family called painted snipe, with the hyphen in it. And I don't know whether there's any others even in the family. There are no other painted snipes in India, according to the book, anyway. This one is a female. The females are in the painted snipes, kind of like phalaropes, are more colorful than the males. And this she was actually kind of like coming out of, I don't know, obviously all this grassy stuff, on the edge of a marsh. And we had to walk through this little town from where we could park our vehicles to get to this little marshy area where it was. And the whole way, about 35 kids, I think they just got out of school, went with us. All they could say in English was hello, so it was constantly hello, 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 hello. I mean, it was very funny, actually. It was cute. These were little, maybe 6, 7, 8-year-old children. And there was one little kid, though, who knew one other thing in English, and that was, I want money. I didn't give him any. I'm pretty sure he pulls that a lot. Spotted owlets. Can you see two? I mean, just one is just barely, I admit. Right there is the top of the head. They are really just as cute as they look in the picture. Cuter. They're same genus as burrowing owls. We didn't see. I don't know whether or not these burrow, but we did oftentimes see them in kind of like stumps like this. So like the burrowing owls in the irrigation pipes over by the Salton Sea, California. And there's a kingfisher. I think this is a little bit smaller maybe than our belted kingfisher, but not significant. Bill might be bigger, but I think the length of the bird's a little smaller, but those colors are just stunning. And it really were. When that bird flew, especially in the sunshine, that turquoise would just knock your socks off. It was amazing. And this is an Indian roller. I think this is its own family, and I believe there's maybe only a couple of other rollers in the entire family. I know there's a lilac-breasted roller. You probably saw that, John, in Africa, and a European roller. Those are the only two that I know of. But then I haven't studied the world, just parts of it. Bayback shrike, really, I thought a very pretty shrike. But, just looks like a shrike. When you see it, you know it's a shrike. Wire-tailed swallows, needless to say, male and female. Only the male has the wires. They're cute little things. The swallows tend to be, I think. A gray-headed canary flycatcher. I think the name is as big, if not bigger, than the bird. It's not that big, maybe 5-ish inches or so. And this is in a family that we don't have any of here in this country, and it's called the fairy flycatcher family. I don't know what the significance of the name is, but there you go. It's in the fairy flycatcher family. And I think it's the only one of those that we saw. I mean, not just the only species that we saw in the fairy flycatcher family. I don't even know how many are in the family. I have no idea. White wagtail, we actually had several different species of wagtails in various places, but this was the best picture. But we had yellow wagtail, gray wagtail, citrine wagtail, and white-browed wagtail that I can think of off the top of my head. Closely related to wagtails are pipits, and the paddy field pipit is in the same genus as the American pipit, and sort of looks similar in some ways. And these are bats. Indian flying fox, they're about, I would say the body is at least about 1 foot long. The wingspan is probably at least 2 feet. And we saw these, we stopped for a rest stop, but it was practically noon. Lunch was like 2 or something. Anyway, I don't remember what time lunch was. But at any rate, all these trees, and there was at least 100 of them, if not more, flying around, and then they go and land and hang, and then they'd fly around some more. So it was odd. They're fruit bat, and I suppose if you're going to eat fruit, daytime is as good a time as any. I don't know, but anyway, they're really cute, I think. And this is fuel. This pole stack, these are individual patties stacked up, as you can probably tell. And essentially what the deal is here is that they're used for heating and cooking, and they are cow dung. India is 80% Hindu, and the Brahma cattle are sacred to the Hindus. And they can go wherever and whenever they want, and there's lots of them. And so there's lots of cow dung. So the women go collect the cow dung. They mix it with water, because I think they probably collect it when it's drier. and then they mix it with water and make these patties. They're about so big. And they put them out in the sun to dry, and then they stack them up in these stacks, and that's fuel in the rural areas, which at least is an efficient recyclable use of cow dung, I guess. So then our last area that we went for the trip is Ranthambore National Park, but that says Tiger Reserve, and that's because prior to its being designated as a national park, it was originally designated the same area as a tiger preserve for the Bengal tiger, which I believe are still considered endangered. So there are a number of preserves around India to protect the Bengal tiger. So as far as the birding stuff we went mostly in this section of Ranthambore. This brownish is what's called a buffer zone. So tigers can go in there, but if you go in there, there's no protection for you, or your cattle will get in there. There's no protection for your cattle either. But the tigers sometimes do go there. So we were told. This is called the Banas River. And then probably on both sides, but I think it was this side, this is pretty much desert, and you'll see a little desert. And then the Ranthambore itself is mostly a forest, more what they call a dry forest. Dry because I think the area just doesn't ever get a whole lot of rain. And it's really hard to tell from here, but these little squiggly lines you can see in there, here's some down here, are like routes. They're called zones. And the park is very particular about how many people can go in and how long you can be there, and if you do go, you have to go with a park ranger and one of their drivers and one of their vehicles, and you must stay in the zone to which you're assigned for that morning or afternoon. And we could usually go in from about 7 in the morning which was about daylight, to 10 or 10:30, something like that, and we had to be out. And then we could go back at, I think it was 2 or 2:30 till sunset, which was around 5:30ish. Keep in mind it was February, and it was early part of February too, rather than the latter part. And the reason for that is to protect, I think, just to keep the animals from being totally overwhelmed by so many people. All the animals, not just the tigers, but it would certainly include the tigers. But it was also a great place for birds. It's good for both birds and mammals. These are the vehicles we traveled in the park. These are park vehicles. They're called canter vehicles. It holds about 16 people. And then that would include our guide. Most of the time we would have our guide and say 12 of us, maybe. And then in the front seats here and there would be the driver and the park ranger. And every vehicle had a park ranger. And you can only get out of the vehicle in one designated area, and that is the bathroom place. So they make a stop, either in the morning or the afternoon. So here we go. Indian peafowl. You know all those peacocks we have running around the U.S.? Well, this is what they are. They're really Indian peafowl. And this is a cock. And the female, of course, is called a hen. Now, we didn't get any photos, any of us, as far as I know, in breeding plumage. It's a little early for them to start their breeding displays. By breeding, I don't mean breeding plumage, I mean breeding displays, with the tail. So this, I thought Greg did a pretty good job with this photo. He actually got the back end so you could really see the tail. This is a painted spur fowl, again, in the grouse family. There's a male and a female. It's a male and a female. It's one of the target birds that I missed. But it's kind of pretty, so I wanted to include it in very unusual colors, I thought. Woolly-necked storks. I'm pretty sure that's not wool. I'm sure it's feathers, but it looks like wool. And black-headed ibis, the same family as our ibises. And then a red-naped ibis. And then this is a crested serpent eagle. Well, now it is in the same family as our hawks and eagles, but it is not in any genus that we have here in North America. I don't know about South America. It's not a really huge eagle, as we understand eagles. And its crest is not up at the moment. But I think they are named serpent eagles because that is, in fact, their primary prey is serpents and snakes of some sort. It's a great thick knee. Thick knees are kind of an interesting thing. They are their own family, and they sort of look like shorebirds. But you'll just as easily find them out in this kind of rocky, scrabbly habitat or practically desert as you do next to water. So, I don't know. All I can say is it's its own family. Another lapwing, a river lapwing, which we actually saw by the Bannis River. We did have a day. We went to the Bannis River and spent some time in the desert. This is a common green shank. It's in the it's a same genus as the yellowlegs. And yes, that's a frog that it's working on, and it did get it down. But you can see its, wait a minute before I blind myself, shanks are kind of greenish. And I'm pretty sure it's not in breeding plumage yet either, so probably gets brighter green when it... This is a ruff, also not in breeding plumage, but it's about the only way any of us might ever see a ruff, if we got lucky, in North America, is not in breeding plumage. And then this, and then the next slide are two different species of sand grouse. They are, again, their own family. This one is a chestnut-bellied, and I don't know how well you can tell, but if you could get up close and personal, this chestnut belly is really a beautiful chestnut color. Almost looks maroon. And Greg got really lucky because when I saw them, they were all on the ground, like they just like laying there. So you couldn't see their bellies at all. And then this one is the painted sand grouse, so you can see its upper feathers are far more decorative than the chestnut belly. There are some other sand grouse in Africa. Did you see any, John, when you were there? Yeah. I think I saw one species. I don't remember what it was. Now, you're probably wondering, why did I put a rock pigeon in this show? Everybody knows a rock pigeon. Well, here's the reason why. This bird is native and wild. And the other thing that was interesting, I mean, there are just as many of these things in the cities as we have them in our cities. But you know how ours are all different colors? You know, not every single one of them, but we have a lot of different variety of colors in city pigeons. Every single pigeon I saw anywhere in India I went looked exactly like this one. So for some reason or other they haven't. So they do have kind of semi-domesticated rock pigeons there, but this was taken in Ranthambore. This is a greater cuckoo. It's in the cuckoo family, fairly good-sized bird. Indian scops owl. You know, I never saw one of these owls outside of half hidden in a hole, but I think they're roughly the same size as the screech owl, maybe a little bigger. And they kind of look screech owl-like, but it's not the same genus. Same family, but not the same genus. This is a brown fish owl. I don't know whether they actually fish, but they are always found near water. I know there is some owls that are called fishing owls, unless they've changed the name to all of them, and that really do fish. Unless they've changed the name to all of them to fish owls. I don't know about that. He's not as big as a great horned owl, although he looks pretty big in that picture. Is a common kingfisher, another just stunningly beautiful kingfisher. This little guy is about 6 inches long. And then this is a pied kingfisher, and this one is almost, again, as big as a belted kingfisher. Not quite, maybe, but pretty close. Kingfishers, by the way, I guess are worldwide. I saw kingfishers in Africa, and then now India, here, South America, Central America. This is actually a woodpecker, the black-rumped flameback. I guess that's the flame. But interestingly enough, at least in the book, there's a subspecies that's not where we were, but is in India, where this yellow flame is replaced by a red one. That's what the picture in the book shows anyway. But they were not in the area where we were. There were more woodpeckers on our list, but I think there was only one other woodpecker, a species of woodpecker that was actually seen, and they were not a dime a dozen, the woodpeckers in general. This is the Alexandrine parakeet. It's the largest parakeet in India, and that's primarily because it has this really long tail. It's a pair. And this is another reason why I really want to go to India. When I was looking on the ABA website and saw this trip, and they had a really gorgeous picture of the plum-headed parakeet. I said, now how cool is that, a plum-headed parakeet? So they were the only place we saw them was Ranthambore National Park. And then mixed, they had a feeding station in one area, And so that's why you have this big group where they're feeding. But these others, the rose-ringed parakeets, they were abundant. We saw them in Delhi. We saw them in lots of different places. They were the most common parakeet we saw. But the other two we only saw in Ranthambore. I'm not saying they're limited there. That's just the only places we saw them. And this is a black drongo, obviously black. Drongos are, again, their own family. There's more than one species of drongo. Some of them are also in Africa. And but this forked tail is a pretty good giveaway for a black one, besides the fact that it's black. But if you're confusing it with some black bird, look for the forked tail. This is a white-browed fantail. It's in the fantail family. And the fantails are, this bird, at least, I won't say about all of them, but I think this is probably why they're called fantails. You know how painted redstarts fan their tail to stir up insects? Well, this bird does the same thing, but it's not a warbler or a red. It's a fantail. It's a family. The rufous tree pie is in the corvid family, so a cousin of jays and crows. This, I don't know whether this is true of all of them or whether it just happens to be because these are Ranthambore National Park and those who are pretty habituated to humans perhaps. But somebody had one sitting on the top of his hat one after. We were stopped looking at that tiger cub. Next thing you know, this guy has a tree pie sitting on his head. The cinereous tit, needless to say, same family as our chickadees and titmice. Ashy-crowned sparrow lark. It's a mouthful. Anyway, related to horned larks, same family as horned larks. Common tailor bird. I didn't think this thing was very common. As I recall, we struggled to find this bird. And it is also in that Cisticola family. This is an Asian pied starling. Again, same family as the European starling. This is just some travel. We saw folks carting stuff either to or from a market, I think, in the desert, the day we went out into the desert. Another thing they do is though that some of the people do hook up a cart to a camel and they'll come to, like we saw some around our lodge one day at lunchtime, and they really were hoping some of us would take advantage of a ride in the cart with the camel, but I don't know if anybody did. Indian mud turtles, pretty good sized turtles. I'm not a turtle expert, so I don't know what else to tell you. The chinkara is actually a gazelle found in India. This is a prey item for some of the other large animals in general, larger predators in general. We'll see a few in a little bit. The chital, or spotted deer, they are also apparently good eating. They do keep their spots all their life, by the way, as you can tell by males with multi-tipped antlers and with spots. And this is a sandbar. This is actually the largest deer. This one happens to be a female, because the males, in fact, do have antlers. And I guess they like these ponds or lakes or whatever you want to call them are covered with this, some sort of duckweed type of stuff, only it's red, not green. And they seem to like to be out in the water, maybe just because it was pretty warm in the afternoon. And it may also protect them from the tigers, because these are the favorite tiger food, we were told. The bird on the rump is actually a little egret, but of course it looks to us like a snowy egret. And then the other one is a Indian pond heron that I showed you earlier. The wild boar, isn't he cute? I don't know whether he's prey or not. I don't know whether anybody tries to get him and eat him. Um, but they're around anyway. I don't think they predate. Pred, they eat plants. That's what roots and stuff like that. Southern Plains gray langur, another species of monkey. They're bigger than the rhesus monkeys, but they're not real huge. Of course, we only saw them sitting like this, so seriously, they weren't all nursing, but they were all sitting. And then a Bengal fox blends right in really well, as you can tell, with his habitat. This guy was he was having his morning rest right outside his burrow, sunning himself. The minute he figured out there were about 12 cameras aiming right at him, he went back in his burrow. Ruddy mongoose, there was a couple other mongoose species that were around, but I didn't happen to see them. Those are predators, actually, but they're not going to they're not going to eat big things, mostly probably insects and things like that. Oops. Sloth bear. This is not a huge bear, as you can probably tell. And I'm not entirely sure why they're called sloth bears, because I would imagine if they have to, they can move pretty fast. Although the one that I did see, which was nowhere as good as that, was just sort of really taking its good old sweet time. I kept waiting for it to come out of tall grass, and it never did. But of course, that's a predator. And this is a leopard with a kill. Now, interesting thing is, my group on specific tour, when we went by this place, all we saw was the kill, not the leopard. And the kill was much more devoured than that shows. So, which is probably why the leopard wasn't there. And then, I don't know if you can, hope you can see this. This is a tiger paw. And this, of course, the hand, it's one of our guide's hands, is on the ground just for comparison, but you can see the paw is pretty close to the size of that hand. And this paw print was made by this guy. This is the dominant male of the particular area that we were in, who also happens to be the father of the cub that you saw at the beginning. And our group was sitting on one side of this, like I say, small, shallow lake, pond, whatever they call them. And we happened to look across the pond, and we could see him over there, kind of just ambling along the shore. He'd obviously been sleeping in some mud. We thought he could have at least gotten cleaned up for his photo op, but he didn't. Anyway, and he kind of we watched him walk along the whole edge of the far shore and kind of come around like this, and then there was a hill and a lot of trees, and he kind of disappeared. But the park ranger with us said, I think he's going to come up along the edge of the road, just up this little hill on the road from where we were. So we turned around really fast and went back up the top of the hill, and sure enough, just within a minute after we got up there, here he comes, and by that time there's also several Jeeps. They can only take 4 people, 2 or 4 people. And so that's why you see a Jeep in there. But anyway, he was probably 20 or 25 feet from the vehicles, didn't look left nor right, didn't pay a bit of attention to us, just kept ambling on and disappeared down the hill, and probably there was a kind of a gully gorge type thing down there. That's probably where he went to rest for the day. He doesn't look too hungry, does he? No, he probably isn't. And actually, this was our last day, the last day of our trip before we had to drive, get on our buses and go back to Delhi to fly home. So here's a bus. but we didn't really take this one. Our guide, one of our guides called this, rock jumper guides, referred to this as a disco bus because when it's running and in service, I mean, it actually does serve little local communities. They blare this loud music. It's very similar to, you know, metal rock here. It just blares all over the place, and then, of course, it's all decorated with this stuff. We saw disco tractors of the same thing as well. So, thank you very much. And it's about 10 after 8, Laura. Do we have time for questions? Or okay. Anybody have any questions? Quite a few. You see, we were there in February, so yes, quite a few of these had come from much further north, like both the just as an example, the blue throat and the ruby, the Siberian ruby throat, spend their breeding season up in like Alaska, the Arctic type of areas, but mostly in Russia and Eastern Europe and perhaps Scandinavia, I'm not sure. And so, yeah, they were wintering. So, yeah, we had a mix. I mean, I think some of the ducks are probably there and go to other places. I mean, for the winter and go to other places for other times. But I think like the painted stork, woolly neck stork, some of the storks and the Saurus cranes maybe are residents. The crow, you know, the corvids and tree pies and that kind are residents. I think the Indian robin is, even though it's not a robin, I think that's actually a resident of the area. So yeah, it was kind of a mix of residents and my birds who had come for the winter primarily. Yes. There's that little story about, if you don't mind my taking a minute, because I thought it was kind of interesting. Russ, how do you turn this thing off? Oh, I didn't go far enough, I guess. Okay. One time when one of the days we were at Ranthambore, we had this little break, you know, between our end of our morning time in Ranthambore Park and then before we could go back in again in the afternoon. And so somehow one of the women had found out that in a little village real close to where we were staying, where our lodge was, which was about a mile outside of the park, was a women's cooperative. And if there was enough interest, they would arrange for one of our, we had 2 or 3, I forget which, big, huge tour coach buses with us, you know, for 1 or 2 to take us there. Well, they figured 1 would be enough. Because the guess was that probably the women would be interested in going, but not the men. Well, I would say about 75% at least of our entire group went, including several men. And it's true, all the women went. Because the point of the cooperative is the women sew things. They even took the cotton, the plain cotton fabric. They dye it, and then they sew it into garments, purses, tote bags, shirts for men. So I think they had some little stuffed toys that were made out of this cotton fabric. And of course, all kinds of prints and colors and all that kind of stuff. And they sell them. And they sell them not just at their cooperative, which is one place you can buy them, but they also have buyers in at least other cities in India. I don't know whether they sell outside of India or not. But the whole point is, they're primarily very poverty-stricken, rural people, that the women are adding to the income of the household. And the most important thing to those women is to get their children educated. And that's why they are wanting to earn the money. But here's what else happens is the family, not only does their income better, they can get the children better educated. they also end up having less children. And allegedly, even the husbands are happier. And they probably really are, because they don't have so many mouths to worry about, to feed. And for India, it's a good thing. India has a population of about 1.2 billion people, so they can do without a couple. and the women are happy. They feel like gives them some self-esteem and some value, some way they feel valuable about themselves and worthwhile. So, yes, John. The food, well, most of our food, the accommodations were very nice. We stayed in 2 really nice lodges. And in Delhi, we stayed at a 5-star hotel right near, 10 minutes from the airport. Because the airport, of course, is really kind of on the outskirts of town, and trying to get downtown, just with the traffic, is a major hassle. But the Bagh, which was near Bharatpur, was just lovely. It's a bunch of smaller buildings that have anywhere from 3 to 6 rooms in them, scattered throughout this entire orchard of not just one kind of fruit. It was a number of kinds of fruits and nuts. And it was quite a bit of territory. And then there were 2 buildings that were set aside just as restaurants. And then we stayed in a place called the Tiger Lodge, just outside of Ranthambore. It was a really nice, again, smaller, not scattered as many acres as the Bagh, but the same idea of buildings with only maybe 6 to 8 rooms in them, kind of scattered around. One was around a big, green grassy circle, and the others were kind of out the back, but it was at a big green lawn, and that was a good place to be because it was right near the dining room. The food was all buffet. If you're feeding 60 paying customers plus 5 rock jumper guides and 3 ABA staff members, so practically 70 people, buffet is really the only practical way to do it. And it was all Indian food, which I have to say I'm not a huge fan, but there was a combination of both very spicy, hot spicy type stuff and much blander. So, and they had quite a bit of pasta, but I kind of became a vegetarian when I was there because meat is a problem as far as good meat. What they have mostly is chicken, which is fine, and some lamb. But I think they must have been pretty skinny lambs and chickens before they were butchered, to tell you the truth. Because there was not a lot of meat on them. It was almost not worth the effort, so I just sort of said, oh, heck with it. But pasta and rice and a lot of vegetables. We did have a lot of vegetables, both raw and cooked. So, and soup. They made pretty good soup for the most part. And the desserts were kind of interesting. They were usually pretty good. Some of them were made with rice, some were made with other things. I'm not even sure what all they were made with, but they mostly tasted pretty. A lot of sugar, I can tell you that, most of them. So, yeah.
You sure it wasn't just one rock pigeon following you around?
Oh, no, I'm positive. Actually, there were several in that one area, and that one was just easier, kind of posed on that snag, so. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.